The first thing to figure out when playing any stringed instrument from a keyboard, like a mandolin or guitar or banjo, is the pitches of the open strings. I find that's one of the keys to getting natural sounding chord voicings. By really internalizing where the open strings are, you'll gravitate towards realistic sounding voicings, or at least ones that have a natural sounding spacing to them. The open strings on a mandolin are G, D, A, and E. It's tuned in fifths. So for example, how would we play a G major chord? What I like to do is to go through each note and move it up by a half step until it reaches a chord tone. So for a G major, I would move the E up to a G, the A up to a B, and then I can just keep the D and G playing open strings. So the final step to just double check that chord voicing is to look at the fretboard display and make sure that each note is played on a different string, or rather each string is playing a single note. And it is, so that's a good chord voicing for a G major. Let's try an A major. So I'll go back to the open strings, and I can keep the E and A the same. I'll move the D up to an E and the G up to an A. Now, this is a perfectly good A5 chord, but I want an A major chord. So in this case, what I'll do is I can move the A here up to a C sharp to cover the major third, and that works. Or I can move the E up to an A above it, and that works too. So if I look at the fretboard display here, I'm not just looking to make sure that each string is playing a single note, but I'm also just looking at the range that all those notes cover on the fretboard, just to sort of double check that it's humanly possible. Okay, so let's try a D major chord next. Go back to the open strings. I'll move the E up to an F sharp. The A can stay there, as can the D, and then the G can move up to an A. So that works for a D major chord. Let's try one more, an E major chord. So going back to the open strings, I'll keep the E the same. The A can move up to a B. Remember, we're only moving up, not down, so I can't go to the G sharp there. I can go to the B, and then the D will move up to an E, and the G will move up to a G sharp. So I've got the third in the bass, so to speak. So that works. Kind of sounds like a first inversion chord, right? So let's see if there's any alternatives. Like, what if instead of moving the G up to a G sharp, we move it up to a B, right? And then to cover the third, I move this E up to a G sharp. So that works. And actually, one thing that you'll notice is that this is just that D major voicing we came up with, but moved up a whole step. So that's one important thing to note, is that any of these voicings that we come up with, we can always transpose upward to access other chords, and other keys. So for example, that G major voicing we came up with can be moved up to get an A flat major chord, A major, B flat major, B major, and so forth. Or the D major chord, that voicing, you can get an E flat major, E major, F major. So that's something important, is when you're figuring out these different chord voicings, just get them into muscle memory, and that way you can just gravitate towards those different chords. Without having to go through the entire process of figuring out how to derive those different chord voicings. Anyway, I hope this video is helpful, and thank you for watching.